Does everybody have my share screen?
No.
Okay. Corinne, am I able to share my screen now?
Should be able to. Let me go ahead and.
How's that?
There,
There we go. So again, we have 12 propositions. California is rather famous for our propositions. We were only the 10th state to adopt the initiative process, but no other state, apart from maybe Oregon, uses the initiative process quite as much as California does. And in our initiatives, 14 through 25, we have some that are initiative statutes, and this will change the law. And the initiative statutes are generated from petitions from voters. We have one referendum, and this is something that the legislature has already voted into law, and we are going to evaluate it, and that's 25 to see if we want to keep it. Then we have some constitutional amendments. We have one constitutional amendment, an initiative amendment that came in through petitions from the people. And we have 4 legislative amendments, which are amendments to our Constitution that the legislature prepared, and we are going to vote on those also. So we're going to start with Proposition 14. And to do that, I'd like to introduce, all of a sudden I just forgot, Bird Lochte. Bird, would you tell us about Prop 14, please? Thank you.
Yes. Proposition 14, called the California Stem Cell Research, Treatments, and Cures Initiative of 2020. It's an initiative statute, a law proposed by the people. It authorizes state bonds of $5.5 billion to conduct stem cell research and other medical research, including training, research facility construction, and administrative costs. $1.5 billion would be dedicated to brain-related diseases, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other brain and nervous system diseases. It would build on the work from Prop 71 from 2004 that gave researchers the right to conduct stem cell research. It appropriates general fund money for repayment. The fiscal impact would be increased state costs to repay about $260 million per year for about 30 years. No payments are due for 5 years, when payments are then estimated to be less than $5 per person annually. A yes vote will allow the sale of these bonds, and a no vote will not allow the state to sell $5.5 billion in bonds. Proponents of Proposition 14 say Prop 71, ending this year, has already provided 92 FDA-approved clinical trials for chronic diseases and conditions, as well as 2,900 medical discoveries that have benefited patients. It will build on the success of Prop 71, accelerating medical breakthroughs out of the lab and into clinical trials to help patients. Collaboration with the National Institute of Health has been very beneficial. Prop 14 will contribute to economic recovery by providing new revenue and generating jobs, making treatments more affordable and available to patients. There are no state repayments for 5 years. The cost will be about $5 per person annually, and will start in 2026. Supporters include the University of California, several Nobel Prize winners, and about 70 patient advocate groups. The California Association of Realtors has supported Prop 14 with $15 million. Opponents of Prop 14 say California cannot afford $5.5 billion in new bonds, which becomes $7.8 billion with interest and will lead to higher taxes. Opponents question the integrity, management, and independence of the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, formed for oversight of Prop 71, calling it a state bureaucracy. It does not address the flaws from Prop 71, which did not bring money to the state as promised and did not provide any approved therapies. Grants went to private entities in other states. Institutions such as the National Institute of Health can do a better job. Groups with arguments against 14 are the Institute of Medicine, the Little Hoover Commission, and the Center for Society and Genetics in Berkeley. No large donations by opponents of Prop 14 have been recorded. Are there any questions about Proposition 14, the stem cell research?
I don't see any questions, so I think we can go ahead and move on to the next. Oh, actually, we do have one. If general fund money will be used to pay for Prop 14, what other things won't be done because of that?
This is designated for specific things. It's not taking money from anything else. It is money from the bonds that will be sold for these specific things.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
What is the position of the League of Women Voters?
This is an educational forum, and we're not doing our advocacy here. If you want to go to the League website, you can see how the League is recommending for propositions, but we don't do that when we're doing an educational forum such as this one. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further questions, we'll move on to Prop 15 and Amy Moffett.
All right, thank you, Bird, for that Prop 14. I am going to be talking about Prop 15, which is the only initiative that's a constitutional amendment, and it was put on the ballot by petition signatures. And it increases funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing tax assessment of commercial and industrial property. So this is going to increase property taxes on commercial properties worth more than $3 million. And the fiscal impact is it's going to provide $6.5 billion to $11.5 billion in new funding to local governments. So basically, this measure is going to require commercial and industrial land and buildings to be taxed based on how much they could be sold for instead of their original purchase price. Housing and agricultural land would not change and would continue to be taxed on its original purchase price. The owners with $3 million or less worth of commercial land and buildings would not be affected and continue to be taxed based on their original purchase price. This measure also throws in one little tiny other thing where there's going to change in tax on business equipment less than $500,000, which means that no taxes on business equipment for that amount or lower. So that's good for small businesses as well as businesses that meet certain rules or have 50 or fewer employees. They will not pay taxes on their business equipment. So supporters argue that this closes property tax loopholes benefiting wealthy corporations. The top 10% of California's most valuable non-residential commercial properties account for 92% of this measure's new revenues. They also say that Prop 15 funds can go directly to education and state politicians can't take it away. And opponents say that this repeals taxpayer protections that was voted in Prop 13, which capped property taxes and limited increases annually, providing certainty in their bill. And it doesn't stop the tax from being passed on to small business tenants with skyrocketing rents. And so that's where I'm gonna stop and I will take questions.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat asking how are Timberlands going to be treated under Prop 15?
Oh, that's a good one. I do not know. Because really they're only calling out ag land and residential land. So if a company is more than 3 million, they might be affected, but that's something that I could research for later to respond to later.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? What are examples of the equipment that would be taxed?
Business equipment is those things like computers, kind of like the infrastructure, the inside a building. Usually they're being taxed, but again, they're trying to put in, so I'm sorry, my brain just froze. Yeah, so it's mostly like infrastructure, like if you have machinery, computers, that kind of thing. So that small businesses that have less than 500,000 would not be taxed at all on business equipment.
Okay, and another question in the chat is, what is the basis for the claim that it would cost more than $1 billion to implement?
I do not know what the basis for that claim is. I think that I do know. So what's going to happen is that county assessors are going to have more work. They will have to assess these properties every year. And so the county assessors will have work. However, let me look at my notes. There was something about that. 1 second. Yeah, basically my notes just say counties manage the property tax and county assessors determine the taxable value of the property. So it's more work for them.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay, we had Kay Escarda on Prop 16.
Okay, thank you. Prop 16 is allowing for diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions. Policies and programs, commonly called affirmative action, in state hiring and contracting and education, are currently banned in the California Constitution. Proposition 16 will reverse that ban and allow schools and other institutions to take race, ethnicity, color, national origin, and gender into consideration when admitting students to college or in hiring of public employees or in selecting contractors for public projects. The history behind this proposition is that for about 20 years, policies and programs were developed to allow and encourage women and minority groups to participate more fully in higher education, in government, and in contracting. These programs were what we commonly referred to as affirmative action. Then in 1996, an amendment to the Constitution was passed. It was called Proposition 209, and that banned consideration of such policies and programs unless they qualify for certain exemptions. Well, since that time, the percentage of women and most minorities participating under the ban has decreased. And this proposition then seeks to reverse that ban imposed by 209 and allow for programs intended to prevent discrimination with state and consistent with state and federal law. Prop 16 is supported by a broad coalition of government officials, educations, minority businesses, and various organizations. It gets its financial support from a broad coalition, and the financial support totals about $9.5 million. And the editorial support for this measure comes from the San Francisco Chronicle, the Mercury News, and the Los Angeles Times. Those opposed It's opposed by several Republican elected officials, the original sponsor of Proposition 209, and an Asian American organization. It's its financial support, which totals about $122,000 mainly from that Asian American organization. And the editorial opposition comes from the Wall Street Journal and the Orange County Register. Change the name of the newspaper. Those in favor of Proposition 16 say that repealing Proposition 209 allows public institutions to work toward greater diversity. It expands equal opportunity for all Californians, increasing access to fair wages, good jobs, and quality schools for everyone. And it fights wage discrimination and systemic racism, opening up opportunities for women and people of color. Those opposed to Prop 16 say that the politicians want to strip the Constitution of its prohibition on discrimination and preferential treatment, so-called affirmative action. Reversing 209 gives an unfair advantage to minorities. They say that discrimination is bad, whether it benefits underprivileged groups or not, and the state should treat all Californians equally. Are there any questions to what I have just said?
Okay, hearing none, Corinne? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to Prop 17 with Judy Bennett.
Good evening. Thank you, Nancy. I'm Judy Bennett, and Proposition, we've got 18 up on the board, Nancy. Let's go up to 17. Okay, Proposition 17 restores the right to vote after completion of a prison term. This is actually one of the easiest to understand propositions on the ballot. It's a constitutional amendment brought forth by the state legislature. The question is whether you believe a citizen who has completed his or her prison term but is still on probation should be allowed to vote. Well, in 1974, California voters approved restoring the right to vote to persons once they had completed their sentences. Some of us were raised as children with the thought that one of the reasons not to break the law is because you would lose your right to vote. Well, that has all changed now. But a yes vote would allow parolees to vote. A no vote says they need to complete their parole before being able to vote again. A fiscal impact would occur. Allowing persons on parole to vote would mean more voters and more voting materials would be needed. In California, there are about 50,000 people on parole, and there would be costs to both the local jurisdiction and the state. Proponents say parolees hold jobs, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to society. And when they're allowed to vote, they feel they're a part of the community and are less likely to commit crimes. Opponents say parole is a part of the punishment for committing a crime and that parolees should prove their rehabilitation before they can vote again because half of them commit crimes again. And finally, allowing parolees to vote would deny justice to the victims. So in conclusion, a yes vote means persons on parole would be able to vote, and a no vote means keeping things as they are, that parolees must first complete their parole before being able to vote. Supporters of this measure include the California Legislature, the League of Women Voters of California, and Californians for Safety and Justice, and Kevin McCarthy, the Assembly member who brought it forth and is the author of Proposition 17. Opponents of this are Victims United of California and Jim Nielsen, retired chairman of the California Board of Prison Terms. So are there any questions on this one?
There was one question. The current number of parolees was that 15,015 or 50,000?
50,000. 50,000.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Okay, now we'll hear from Amy Moffett again on Prop 18.
Okay, hi, thanks. So Prop 18 was put on the ballot by the legislature. So a couple of assembly members put this on the ballot. And it amends the California Constitution to permit 17-year-olds to vote in primary and special elections if they will turn 18 by the next general election and be otherwise eligible to vote. So as of, the fiscal impact is increased statewide county costs likely between several hundreds of thousands of dollars and $1 million every 2 years. Increased one-time cost to the state of hundreds of thousands of dollars. As of June 29, 2020, there are about 108,000 17-year-olds pre-registered to vote in California. So 17-year-olds are allowed to pre-register to vote currently. And also, because current state law allows registered voters to run for elective office, this measure would result in those 17-year-olds who turn 18 by the next general election to run for elective office if they meet all other existing eligibility requirements for elective office. So the supporters say that this will boost youth civic engagement in our elections and help create more lifelong participants in the most fundamental process of democracy. They say that youth are extremely underrepresented in our electoral process, despite the fact that they are heavily impacted by the policies created by those elected. And studies show that voting is habit forming. Once an individual votes in an election, they are more likely to do so again. The opponents say that real life experience with earning a living and paying taxes is vital for voting, that these 17-year-olds have no frame of reference to make the vital decisions voters make for themselves and all other members of society when they vote, and that 17-year-olds are minors for several reasons. They are a captive audience to teachers, making them vulnerable to one-sided influence. So this is pretty simple as well. A yes vote means that the state constitution will be amended to permit 17-year-olds who will be 18 by the time the general election comes around and otherwise eligible to vote. They will be allowed to vote in primary or special elections. A no vote means that nothing will change and only voters age 18 and older and eligible can vote during any election. Are there any questions?
And hearing none, we'll move on to Prop 19 with Bird Lochte.
Thank you, Nancy. Prop 19 is a legislative constitutional amendment which would be added to the Constitution. The ballot title is Changes Certain Property Tax Rules. It defines eligible homeowners as seniors, severely disabled, families, and victims of wildfires or natural disasters, allowing them to transfer tax assessments with an adjustment for a more expensive new primary resident anywhere in the state within 2 years of the sale. It will reassess at market value inherited homes not used as primary residence by the new owner, closing a loophole that can benefit wealthy heirs who use the property for income purposes. It establishes the California Fire Response Fund. Fiscal impact, the legislative analyst suggests that local governments and schools could gain millions of dollars of property tax revenue, which could grow to hundreds of millions of dollars over time. It also acknowledges that local governments may have additional costs to implement the changes. A yes vote will allow this measure to be added to the Constitution, and new rules will apply for transfer and sales of property for the defined eligible homeowners. A no vote will not allow this measure to be added to the Constitution, keeping the current tax code as it is for these eligible groups. No change will be made for inherited properties. Proponents of Prop 19 say It limits property taxes for eligible homeowners and removes restrictions on the location of a new primary residence if the need to move closer to family or for medical care or to replace or repair a home damaged by wildfire without fear of increased taxes. It would close the loophole exploited by investors and heirs who use the property for income purposes. They cite cases of politicians who have taken advantage of this loophole. It provides funding dedicated to fire protection and medical response. It enjoys bipartisan support, and proponents emphasize that Prop 19 protects the rights of homeowners under Proposition 13. Supporters of Proposition 19 are a diverse group of firefighters, seniors and disability rights groups, wildfire victims, and family farmers. The California Association of Realtors and their PAC, the National Association of Realtors, and the California Coalition of Firefighters supported Proposition 19 with about $15.7 million. Opponents of Proposition 19 say this is an attempt by Sacramento politicians and real estate special interests to raise property taxes by removing voter-approved protections of Prop 58 and Prop 193 from the Constitution. It would force the reassessment of inherited property unless it is used as the new owner's principal residence within a year, eliminating the earlier Proposition 58. It would force the sale of a family business because of increased taxes. The same provisions of Prop 19 were rejected in Prop 5 in 2018 by the voters. Proposition 19 is not necessary, and it is a major hit on the ability of any parent in California to take care of their kids. Listing arguments against Proposition 19 are the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers League and some Republicans and Democrats in the legislature. No large donations have been recorded against Proposition 19. Are there any questions?
So there's a question in the chat. Can you explain how local governments would get extra money from this? If people can move to a new place and still pay low taxes in the place they've been living for 30 years, how does that help the local government? And wouldn't they get more money if the property were sold on the open market?
The additional income will come from the inherited properties that have to be reassessed at the current value. Right now they are not, and this is inherited property. The proponents say that there are wealthy people from out of state who use this. They inherit a property and then they make it a rental or a vacation home or something. They're not using it as a primary residence, and that's the loophole that they want to close. And that would provide more income because they would all be reassessed and continue to be reassessed.
Another question is, will this be retroactive to the 2018 wildfire victims?
The law, it's trying to overturn the 2018 law. If you vote yes, you will be overturning Proposition 5 from 2018. I think it's Proposition 5, is it? Let me just be sure I've got the right. Yes, Proposition 5 in 2018. This would overturn that. It would remove it from the Constitution.
Okay, and what is the current law?
The current law is that heirs heirs of properties, as long as they inherit it, there still is assessed at the rate that it is when they inherit it. It doesn't go up in value. It's not reassessed at a higher value. And this is to overturn that, to get rid of that. It's the proponents say that is a loophole. The proponents say it's a loophole. The opponents say that it is a way that people can give their property to their children.
Are there any other questions? Okay, and we do have time. We'll have time for more questions at the end too. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay, Maggie Augustine will talk about Prop 20.
Maggie, I think you might be muted.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Okay, this initiative is also known as the Criminal Sentencing, Parole, and DNA Initiative. It limits access to parole program established for nonviolent offenders who have completed the full term of their primary offense by eliminating eligibility for certain offenses. What it would do is it would redefine more crimes as violent, thus excluding them from the parole program. It would also reclassify some misdemeanors more into the wobble category, which means they could be either a felony or a misdemeanor, depending upon the level of theft. And it lowered it from 250 to 950 for this category. It also includes now 2 crimes, serial crime and organized retail crime, which are also wobbler cases and therefore can vacillate between felony and misdemeanor. In terms of being released early from prison, they now have the probation office now has to consider a lot more factors in determining this, and it is denied to those who are convicted of assault and domestic violence, and also to those who propose unreasonable risk of committing felonies. Currently, DNA collection is restricted to felony, arsonist, and sex offenders. This would now use it on misdemeanor cases such as shoplifting, forging checks, and domestic violence. Now, the fiscal impact would be an increase in state and local correctional, court, and law enforcement costs, likely in tens of millions of dollars annually, depending upon implementation. What a yes vote means is that people, particularly in the theft-related crimes, could receive increased penalties such as longer jail sentences. More factors have to be considered for early release, and law enforcement now would collect DNA on misdemeanors. A no vote means that penalties for the theft-related crimes would not be increased. There would be no change in the process for early release, and law enforcement would only collect DNA for a felony, sex offenders, or an arsonist. In terms of the proponents, they feel that this closes a loophole in a law that now allows convicted child molesters, sexual predators, and others convicted of violent crimes to be released early from prison. It also expands DNA collection to solve more serious crimes, and it strengthens sanctions against habitual thieves who steal repeatedly. Numerous individuals and groups support this. Public officials, safety officials, business leaders, and numerous citizens support this. And the aggregate contribution for this is over 3 million. Now, those who are against it feel like this is a scam. California already has severe and lengthy sentences for serious and violent crimes, and it just feels that it just wants to scare people about this, and they feel that the money would be diverted for more significant programs such as rehabilitation, schools, mental health, and homelessness. And the aggregate contributions are over 5 million for this one. And it includes like the ACLU of California, public safety leaders, but there's certainly a smaller groups of people that are against it compared to those who are for it. Any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat, so why don't we go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay, Kay Escarda will talk about Prop 21.
Kay, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Proposition 21 expands local government's authority to enact rent control on residential properties. It allows local governments to establish rent control on residential properties over 15 years old, and the local limits on rate increases may differ from the statewide limits. The history behind this proposal is that the rentals are currently controlled by the 1995 Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. Not all cities have rent control laws, but those that do, such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Jose, limit how much a landlord can increase rents each year. The age of the units limited, and the rent of the new rent units that are produced. Local control boards are paid by fees from the landlords. Rental housing is expensive in California. Renters typically pay 50% more for housing than in other states. Some rents are more than double the national average because of a continual shortage of housing units. Competition increases rents. Proposition 21 allows rent controls on more properties than currently allowed. Cities and counties can apply controls to most housing more than 15 years old, but not on single family, a second home, or on duplexes. Localities can limit how much a landlord can increase rents when a new tenant moves in, but they must allow increases of up to 15% for the next 3 years. It codifies a new state law that allows landlords a fair rate of return. So that would now be put in the Constitution. The arguments for this proposition are that renters need protection in California's expensive rental market. Excuse me. It builds protections for new housing and owners of only 2 properties, and it guards against increased homelessness. The measure is supported by Renters and Homeowners United, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, the Democratic Party, and some unions. Financial support totals $28 million and some change, and most of that comes from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It gets its editorial support from the Los Angeles Times. Those against are say that the most controls worsen the housing crisis, and that it reduces private builder incentive to build more housing, and it reduces property owner values, therefore local tax revenue. The measure is opposed by 4 different coalitions of apartment owners. The biggest one was a coalition of California apartment owners, and some housing, veteran, senior, and social justice advocates. The financial support is $23 million. Most of that comes from Californians for Responsible Housing, supported by the California Apartment Association. And the editorial opposition comes from Orange County Register, Bakersfield Californian, the Mercury News, and the San Francisco Chronicle. So I can take some questions if anybody has any. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Kay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Prop 22. And Prop 22 you may be seeing a lot of